The luxurious first-class cabin was filled with whispers of disdain. Sofia Mendez, with her modest dress and quiet demeanor, stood before the flight attendant, the weight of judgment heavy in the air. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," the flight attendant said with a cold, cutting tone. "This area is for first-class passengers only." Sofia's heart pounded in her chest, the spotlight of all eyes now focused on her. Her first-class ticket, her legitimate right to the seat, was being questioned, not because of anything she had done, but because of how she looked. The whispers of the passengers, the judging glances, they all stung like daggers. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly guess, was that Sofia's husband was the very man who owned the airline, Eduardo Vasquez, a billionaire, the man who had built an empire from nothing, and the same man who would walk into that cabin and change everything in the blink of an eye. Sofia Mendez nervously adjusted the watch on her wrist, a gift from her husband, a reminder of their first meeting. At 35, her simple yet elegant dress contrasted with the jewelry and designer clothes that dominated the priority boarding area. The first-class cabin of Stellar Airways gleamed with its spacious leather seats, impeccably dressed flight attendants, and the aroma of freshly served champagne. Eduardo had insisted she enjoy this flight alone, as a reward for the successful charity event she had organized. "You deserve all the luxury in the world," he had said before being called to an emergency meeting, promising to meet her at the resort a few hours later. Sofia took a deep breath and handed her first-class ticket to the attendant at the gate. It was time to allow herself a bit of the luxury she usually avoided, despite being married to one of the richest men in the country. "I'm sorry, but this area is for first-class passengers only," declared Camilla Reynolds, the head flight attendant, her gaze coldly assessing Sofia's simple dress. Her condescending tone cut through the air like a blade. Tall and impeccably groomed, Camilla wore her blonde hair in a tight bun, her crisp navy uniform adorned with gold stripes that she seemed to wear as badges of superiority rather than service. "I have a first-class ticket," Sofia responded calmly, extending her boarding pass. Camilla took it with her fingertips, as if fearing contamination, her French manicured nails gleaming under the cabin lights. "There seems to be some kind of error," Camilla replied, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising in doubt. "Perhaps you were incorrectly entered into the system." She made a show of examining the ticket from multiple angles, her lips pursed in exaggerated skepticism. A man in an expensive suit looked up from his financial newspaper, his gold cufflinks catching the light as he lowered his reading glasses. "Happens all the time," he commented loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Economy class is getting too crowded these days." Several first-class passengers glanced up, some with barely concealed smirks, others with uncomfortable curiosity. A couple in matching designer outfits whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Sofia and her modest attire. Camilla smiled with false sympathy, her teeth blindingly white. "Let me check if there's a place for you in the back of the plane. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable there." The emphasis on comfortable carried a clear message: you don't belong here. Sofia felt her face burn, a flush creeping up her neck. "Please check again. My husband purchased this seat specifically for me," she maintained her poise, years of professional training as a flight attendant herself coming to her aid. A woman with a diamond necklace the size of a small grape laughed softly. "Darling, everyone says something like that when they want an upgrade. Next, you'll tell us he's a CEO or something equally creative." Discreet laughter rippled through the cabin as Camilla motioned to another crew member, exchanging knowing looks. Sofia touched the watch Eduardo had given her The day they met, when she was still a flight attendant herself. The cool metal against her skin scented her, and memories of the simpler life she led before meeting him gave her strength. She had faced prejudice before, but never expected to encounter it from colleagues in the profession she had once loved. A businessman nearby tapped impatiently on his armrest. "Some of us have meetings to get to," he commented to no one in particular. "Can we resolve whatever this is and take off?" Camilla straightened her already perfect posture. "Please wait here while I resolve this misunderstanding," she said, with an artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps it's better if you wait at the boarding gate while we clarify the situation." Her tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Sophia felt a wave of conflicting emotions: embarrassment, indignation, and a flicker of anger. She could easily mention that she was the wife of Eduardo Vasquez, principal shareholder of Stellar Airways. One word from her could change everything in an instant. But something inside her resisted. Why should she need her husband's name to be treated with dignity? The cabin manager approached, his expression serious beneath his perfectly positioned hat. "Ma'am, it appears we have a problem with your reservation. I'll need to ask you to accompany me off the aircraft while we resolve this." His tone was professional but firm, brooking no argument. The looks of pity and disdain from the other passengers weighed on her as Sophia struggled to maintain her dignity. A woman in her 60s, wearing what appeared to be a full set of sapphires, clicked her tongue disapprovingly. A young executive typing on his laptop barely suppressed a smirk. Sophia stood her ground. "My ticket is valid. I have every right to be here." "Just anyone?" Camilla's smile tightened, her voice dripping with condescension. "We can't have just anyone sitting in first class without proper verification." It was at that moment the aircraft door opened again with deliberate precision, revealing the imposing silhouette of Eduardo Vasquez, standing 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders. His presence commanded attention without effort. The cabin fell silent as Eduardo's steel-blue eyes scanned the space methodically before locking onto Sophia, being confronted by the staff. His expression remained neutral, but those who knew him might recognize the slight tightening around his eyes, a warning sign of the controlled fury building beneath his composed exterior. "Is there a problem?" Eduardo's voice was deep and measured, yet somehow filled the entire cabin. Camilla and the manager exchanged panicked glances, uncertainty replacing their previous confidence. "Sir, we're just resolving a small seating confusion," the manager explained, his tone suddenly solicitous. Eduardo walked down the aisle with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned not just the plane, but the very air around him. Each deliberate step brought him closer to the confrontation, passengers shrinking back instinctively as he passed. "That's my wife's seat, correct?" Doughy Sophia's eyes widened as the realization hit. Eduardo wasn't just her husband, he was the billionaire who owned the airline. "Your wife?" Camilla's voice faltered, the color draining from her face. "We didn't know." The whisper that traveled through the cabin was immediate and electric. "Mr. Vasquez," the manager stammered, "we had no idea." Eduardo's gaze turned to Camilla and the manager. "Did you verify whether she belongs in first class based on her appearance?" The cabin fell into absolute silence, the kind that swallows even the sound of breathing. Eduardo's next words were slow and deliberate, his authority unmistakable. "Sofia Mendez Vasquez, my wife. Has there been an issue with her accommodation?" The manager's composure cracked visibly. "We were just following protocol," he muttered, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. Eduardo continued, his voice calm but filled with power. Did you know that before we married, Sophia was the youngest head flight attendant in the history of Stellar Airways? The cabin fell into hushed awe as Eduardo shared stories of Sophia's incredible career, her achievements far surpassing anyone in the cabin. She understands more about protocol and service than probably everyone in this cabin combined, Eduardo said with a proud smile. And now I believe my wife will take over as Director of Customer Experience. As the confrontation ended, the flight continued in an uncomfortable silence, the crew and passengers now fully aware of the mistake they had made. Later, at the resort, Eduardo and Sophia shared a quiet moment together. You always knew how to make an entrance, she smiled, her voice tinged with pride. Eduardo chuckled softly. This wasn't how I planned it, but it was satisfying to see their faces. Sophia's heart swelled with gratitude as she touched the watch Eduardo had given her. I miss the independence I had before, she confessed. Eduardo gently touched her hand. You've always had it. You just didn't need to prove it to anyone, not even to them. A new chapter where no one is judged by their appearance, where respect is the only standard.